The Peterson family stands as a pillar of respectability in the bustling port city of Baltimore, Maryland in 1907. Henry Peterson, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s with a carefully waxed mustache and impeccable tailoring, operates one of the city's most successful import businesses from his prestigious office near the harbor. His company, Peterson & Sons Trading, has built a reputation for reliable service and fair dealing with merchants throughout the East Coast, making the family name synonymous with integrity and prosperity. Eleanor Peterson, Henry's elegant wife, hosts the most sought-after social gatherings in their fashionable Federal Hill neighborhood. Her charitable work with the Baltimore Ladies Benevolent Society has earned her widespread admiration, particularly her efforts to help newly arrived immigrant families find employment and housing. The couple's 3 adult children, William, Margaret, and James, are equally respected in their own right, with William managing the family's shipping operations, Margaret married to a prominent physician, and James studying law at Johns Hopkins University. Their stately brick mansion, with its manicured gardens and uniformed staff, serves as a symbol of the American dream fulfilled through honest work and moral character. The Peterson family regularly appears in the Baltimore Sun Society page, attending opera openings, charity fundraisers, and civic ceremonies. Henry serves on the board of trustees for the local orphanage, while Eleanor's charitable contributions support 3 different churches and 2 immigrant assistance organizations. Neighbors and business associates describe the Petersons as generous employers who provide steady work for dozens of Baltimore residents. Their shipping company employs longshoremen, clerks, drivers, and domestic workers, all of whom speak respectfully of the family's fair treatment and reliable wages. The family's reputation for helping newcomers to America find honest work has made them beloved figures in Baltimore's immigrant communities, where grateful families often name their children after the Petersons. Yet beneath this carefully cultivated facade of respectability and civic virtue lies a horrifying secret that would shock even the most cynical observers of Baltimore society. The Peterson family's true business has nothing to do with legitimate trade or charitable assistance. Instead, they operate one of the most sophisticated and brutal human trafficking networks on the Eastern Seaboard, using their social standing and business connections to facilitate the enslavement and exploitation of the very immigrants they publicly claim to help. The Peterson family's legitimate import business provides the perfect cover for their criminal operations, allowing them to move human cargo alongside regular commercial goods without attracting suspicion from authorities or competitors. Their well-established shipping routes between Baltimore, New York, and European ports create numerous opportunities to transport victims while maintaining the appearance of routine business operations that have been conducted successfully for over 2 decades. Henry Peterson's carefully cultivated relationships with customs officials, port authorities, and shipping inspectors ensure that Peterson & Sons vessels receive minimal scrutiny when arriving in Baltimore Harbor. His generous donations to the Policemen's Benevolent Association and regular invitations to law enforcement officials for dinner at his mansion have created a network of allies who view the Peterson family as above suspicion and worthy of protection from any potential investigations or accusations. The family's charitable work with immigrant assistance organizations provides them with direct access to the most vulnerable newcomers to America, people who have no family connections, limited English skills, and desperate need for employment and housing. Eleanor Peterson's position with the Ladies Benevolent Society allows her to identify potential victims among recent arrivals, particularly young women and children, who can be easily isolated from any support networks they might have established. William Peterson's role managing the shipping operations gives him direct control over vessel schedules, cargo manifests, and crew assignments, allowing him to coordinate the transportation of victims with remarkable precision and efficiency. His engineering background from MIT enables him to design hidden compartments within ship holds that can conceal human cargo from even thorough inspections, while maintaining the appearance of standard commercial storage spaces. The family's extensive network of business contacts throughout the Eastern Seaboard includes hotel owners, factory managers, and domestic service agencies who participate in their trafficking operations, either knowingly or through willful ignorance. These relationships, built over years of legitimate business dealings, provide the Petersons with ready markets for their victims and create multiple revenue streams from their criminal activities. Margaret Peterson's marriage to Dr. Robert Hayes provides the family with medical expertise and connections that prove invaluable for maintaining their operations. Dr. Hayes, whether through genuine ignorance or deliberate complicity, provides medical examinations and treatments for trafficking victims under the guise of routine health care for new immigrants, helping to ensure that valuable human cargo remains in saleable condition throughout the transportation and placement process. Federal investigator Thomas McKenna arrives in Baltimore in March 1907 as part of a broader government crackdown on human trafficking operations along the Eastern Seaboard. His investigation initially focuses on dock workers and small-time criminals suspected of facilitating illegal immigration, but anonymous tips from concerned citizens gradually direct his attention toward more prominent figures in Baltimore's business community who might be involved in these criminal enterprises. McKenna's first breakthrough comes when he discovers discrepancies in shipping manifests for Peterson and Sons vessels, noting that cargo weights and passenger lists don't match the actual capacity and observed activity at several ships. His careful surveillance of Peterson's shipping operations reveals unusual patterns of nighttime loading and unloading activities that occur away from the main commercial docks, suggesting that the family is conducting business they don't want observed by competitors or authorities. The investigation intensifies when McKenna infiltrates the Baltimore immigrant community and begins interviewing recent arrivals about their experiences seeking employment and housing assistance. Multiple families describe being approached by well-dressed representatives of charitable organizations who promised excellent job opportunities, but then disappeared after collecting detailed personal information about family members, particularly young women and children who might be traveling alone or with minimal supervision. McKenna discovers that several young women who had been referred to domestic service positions through Eleanor Peterson's charitable connections have subsequently vanished without explanation, leaving behind personal belongings and abandoned any contact with family members who had expected regular correspondence. The pattern suggests systematic targeting of vulnerable individuals who could disappear without triggering immediate searches or official investigations. Working with informants in Baltimore's immigrant neighborhoods, McKenna learns about a network of boarding houses, employment agencies, and transportation services that appear to be connected to the Peterson family's business operations. These establishments, while maintaining facades of legitimate services, seem to serve as collection and distribution points for people who are subsequently moved to unknown destinations under mysterious circumstances. The investigator's most significant discovery comes when he identifies a former Peterson employee who had quit abruptly after witnessing suspicious activities at the family's warehouse facilities. The witness, initially reluctant to speak due to fear of retaliation, eventually describes seeing groups of frightened immigrants being held in basement areas of Peterson facilities while awaiting transportation to unspecified destinations, with family members clearly operating as guards and coordinators rather than benefactors. McKenna realizes that the Peterson family's extensive charitable work and social connections have created the perfect cover for a sophisticated trafficking operation that exploits public trust and institutional relationships to prey upon the most vulnerable members of society. Through careful investigation and building trust within immigrant communities, McKenna begins documenting the heartbreaking stories of families who have fallen victim to the Peterson trafficking network. His interviews reveal a pattern of systematic deception and exploitation that has destroyed countless lives while enriching the family that Baltimore society views as charitable benefactors and respected business leaders. Maria Santos, a young Italian woman who arrived in Baltimore 6 months earlier, describes how Eleanor Peterson personally welcomed her at the Immigrant Assistance Center and promised her employment as a domestic servant with a wealthy family in Philadelphia. Instead, Maria found herself trapped in a brothel, where she was forced to work under horrific conditions until she managed to escape and seek help from a sympathetic priest who connected her with McKenna's investigation. The investigation uncovers testimony from Giuseppe Romano, whose teenage daughter Anna disappeared after accepting what was described as an excellent position as a seamstress through Peterson family connections. Romano's desperate search for his daughter led him to discover that several other families had similar experiences, with young women vanishing after being placed in jobs that were supposedly arranged through the Peterson charitable network. McKenna documents cases of entire families who were promised transportation to farming opportunities in the Midwest, but instead found themselves trapped in labor camps where they worked without pay under armed guard. These victims describe being transported in Peterson vessels to remote locations where they were forced to work in agriculture, mining, or manufacturing under conditions that amounted to slavery, with family members held as hostages to prevent escape attempts. The investigator discovers that the Peterson network specifically targeted orphaned children and unaccompanied minors who arrived in Baltimore without family connections that might trigger searches if they disappeared. These children were particularly valuable to traffickers because they could be moved easily and had no one to report their disappearance to authorities or advocate for their rescue. Through interviews with escaped victims, McKenna learns about the sophisticated methods the Peterson family used to maintain control over their victims. They employed a combination of physical intimidation, financial coercion, and psychological manipulation, convincing victims that resistance was futile and that cooperation was their only hope for survival and eventual freedom. The investigation reveals that the Peterson trafficking network operated with remarkable efficiency and organization, moving hundreds of victims annually through carefully planned routes that minimized the risk of detection while maximizing profits from various forms of forced labor and sexual exploitation. The family's legitimate business operations provided perfect cover for these activities, while their charitable reputation ensured that few people would suspect such prominent citizens of involvement in criminal enterprises. McKenna's documentation of victim testimonies creates a comprehensive picture of the Peterson family's true activities and provides the evidence necessary to build a federal case against the entire network. As McKenna's investigation expands, he begins collaborating with federal agents in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston to trace the full extent of the Peterson trafficking network's operations. This coordination reveals that the Baltimore-based family has connections to criminal organizations throughout the Northeast, creating a sophisticated interstate enterprise that has operated successfully for nearly a decade without serious investigation or prosecution. The multi-city investigation uncovers evidence that the Peterson family has been working with corrupt officials in multiple jurisdictions to facilitate their trafficking operations. Port inspectors, immigration officers, and local police in several cities have been receiving regular payments in exchange for overlooking suspicious activities and providing advance warning of any potential investigations that might threaten the network's operations. McKenna discovers that William Peterson has been using his engineering expertise to modify Peterson vessels with hidden compartments designed specifically for transporting human cargo. These modifications include concealed ventilation systems, reinforced restraint points, and soundproofing materials that allow the ships to carry trafficking victims alongside legitimate cargo without detection by customs inspectors or other passengers. The investigation reveals that Margaret Peterson's husband, Dr. Hayes, has been providing medical services that go far beyond routine health care for trafficking victims. Evidence suggests he has been performing procedures designed to make victims more compliant, including administering drugs that cause memory loss and performing surgeries that leave victims physically weakened and dependent on their captors for basic medical care. Federal agents discover that the Peterson family has been operating multiple front businesses beyond their shipping company, including employment agencies, boarding houses, and even a private school that serves as a holding facility for trafficked children. These establishments maintain facades of legitimate operations while serving the network's criminal purposes, creating multiple revenue streams and operational bases throughout the region. McKenna's investigation uncovers financial records showing that the Peterson trafficking network has generated millions of dollars in profits over the past decade, with money being laundered through their legitimate businesses and invested in real estate, stocks, and other assets that provide both financial returns and operational advantages for their criminal activities. The investigator learns that the Peterson family has been remarkably sophisticated in their criminal operations, employing former law enforcement officers as security personnel, hiring lawyers to exploit legal loopholes, and maintaining detailed records that allow them to track victims, manage operations, and coordinate with criminal partners throughout their network. As evidence mounts, McKenna realizes that prosecuting the Peterson family will require unprecedented coordination between federal agencies, local law enforcement, and international authorities to dismantle a trafficking network that has grown far beyond its Baltimore origins. McKenna's investigation reveals the disturbing extent to which Baltimore's elite society has been willfully blind to obvious signs that the Peterson family's activities were not entirely legitimate. His interviews with prominent citizens uncover a pattern of deliberate ignorance and social complicity that enabled the trafficking network to operate with remarkable freedom and minimal risk of exposure or investigation. Several wealthy Baltimore families admit to McKenna that they had noticed unusual aspects of the Peterson operations, but chose not to investigate or report their concerns due to the family's social prominence and charitable reputation. These observers describe seeing groups of frightened, poorly dressed individuals being transported to and from Peterson facilities at odd hours, but assume these were simply part of the family's immigrant assistance activities. The investigation reveals that multiple Baltimore churches and charitable organizations had received substantial donations from the Peterson family in exchange for referrals of vulnerable individuals who might benefit from employment opportunities. Religious leaders and charity workers, motivated by genuine desire to help immigrants and influenced by the Peterson family's generous contributions, unknowingly participated in identifying and delivering victims to traffickers. McKenna discovers that several Baltimore businessmen had informal partnerships with Peterson operations that should have revealed the criminal nature of their activities. Factory owners who received workers through Peterson Employment Services described receiving groups of individuals who appeared malnourished, fearful, and reluctant to speak about their backgrounds or working conditions, but chose not to investigate these obvious warning signs. The investigator learns that Baltimore's social elite had created an environment where the Peterson family's wealth and charitable activities provided immunity from serious scrutiny or criticism. Society pages regularly featured the family's donations and civic activities, creating a public image that made accusations of criminal behavior seem impossible and protecting them from investigation. McKenna's interviews reveal that several prominent Baltimore citizens had received anonymous letters and verbal warnings about the Peterson family's true activities over the years, but dismissed these accusations as rumors spread by business competitors or disgruntled employees. The family's carefully cultivated reputation for integrity made such allegations seem incredible to people who had benefited from their generosity and social connections. The investigation uncovers evidence that Baltimore's political establishment had been influenced by Peterson family donations and social relationships to avoid any serious oversight of their business operations. City officials, police commissioners, and judges had all received various forms of support from the Peterson family that created conflicts of interest and discouraged thorough investigation of complaints or suspicious activities. McKenna realizes that prosecuting the Peterson family will require confronting not only their criminal network, but also the broader social and political systems that enabled their operations through willful ignorance, corruption, and misplaced loyalty to prominent citizens. By summer 1907, McKenna has assembled overwhelming evidence against the Peterson trafficking network, including financial records, victim testimonies, and documentation of the family's criminal operations that spans nearly a decade of systematic exploitation and abuse. His investigation has revealed the remarkable scope and sophistication of their activities, making the case one of the largest trafficking prosecutions in federal history. The investigator's most damaging evidence comes from Peterson family business records that William Peterson had carefully maintained, apparently believing that their social prominence would protect them from any serious investigation. These documents detail victim transportation schedules, payment arrangements with criminal partners, and profit distributions that clearly demonstrate the family's leadership role in the trafficking network. McKenna discovers coded correspondence between family members that discusses their criminal activities using business terminology designed to disguise their true meaning. These letters, found during searches of Peterson properties, provide clear evidence of the family's knowledge and coordination of trafficking operations, contradicting any potential claims of ignorance or minimal involvement in criminal activities. The investigation uncovers testimony from former Peterson employees who had quit their jobs after witnessing criminal activities, but had been too frightened to report their observations to authorities. These witnesses describe seeing trafficking victims being held in Peterson facilities, participating in transportation of human cargo, and receiving instructions to maintain silence about activities they observed during their employment. Federal agents discover physical evidence at Peterson properties, including modified transportation vehicles designed for moving restrained individuals, medical equipment used for controlling victims, and documentation systems for tracking people, rather than legitimate commercial cargo. This evidence provides concrete proof of the infrastructure necessary for large-scale trafficking operations. McKenna's financial investigation reveals that the Peterson family has been laundering trafficking profits through their legitimate businesses and making substantial investments designed to expand their criminal operations. Bank records show unexplained cash deposits, suspicious property purchases, and financial transfers that correspond to trafficking activities documented through other evidence sources. The investigator discovers that the Peterson network has been operating with remarkable sophistication, employing lawyers to exploit legal loopholes, corrupting officials to avoid oversight, and maintaining detailed operational security measures that demonstrate clear criminal intent rather than accidental involvement in illegal activities. As McKenna prepares to present his evidence to federal prosecutors, he realizes that the Peterson case will establish important precedents for trafficking prosecutions and send a powerful message that social prominence and charitable reputation cannot protect criminals from justice when they exploit the most vulnerable members of society. On September 15, 1907, federal agents coordinate simultaneous raids on 17 Peterson-controlled properties throughout Baltimore, marking the culmination of McKenna's 6-month investigation and the beginning of the largest human trafficking prosecution in Maryland history. The carefully planned operation involves over 50 federal agents, local police officers, and specialized rescue personnel trained to assist trafficking victims who might be discovered during the raids. The raid on the Peterson family mansion reveals evidence that the elegant home had been used as both a planning center for criminal operations and a temporary holding facility for high-value trafficking victims. Agents discover hidden rooms in the basement containing restraints, medical equipment, and documentation systems for tracking individuals who had been processed through the family's network before being transported to final destination. At Peterson & Sons headquarters, federal agents uncover the sophisticated infrastructure that enabled the family's trafficking operations, including modified shipping containers designed for transporting human cargo, detailed maps showing transportation routes throughout the eastern seaboard, and financial records documenting payments to criminal partners in multiple states and foreign countries. The raids result in the rescue of 23 trafficking victims who were being held at various Peterson-controlled facilities, including women and children who had been missing for months, and in some cases years. Medical personnel accompanying the raid teams provide immediate assistance to victims who show signs of physical abuse, malnutrition, and psychological trauma resulting from their captivity and exploitation. Henry Peterson is arrested at his office while attempting to destroy business records that document the family's criminal activities. His calm demeanor during the arrest surprises agents, as he appears to have expected this outcome and shows little emotion despite the collapse of both his criminal enterprise and his carefully cultivated social reputation. Eleanor Peterson's arrest at a charity luncheon creates a dramatic scene that shocks Baltimore society, as prominent women who had worked alongside her in various philanthropic endeavors witness federal agents taking into custody someone they had admired and trusted. Her protests of innocence and claims that she had been manipulated by her husband convinced no one familiar with the evidence against her. William and Margaret Peterson are arrested at their respective homes, with both attempting to flee when they observe federal agents approaching their properties. Their capture requires coordination with multiple law enforcement agencies and demonstrates the family's awareness of their criminal liability and preparation for potential prosecution. The arrests send shockwaves through Baltimore's elite society as prominent citizens struggle to reconcile their positive impressions of the Peterson family with the overwhelming evidence of their criminal activities. The scandal dominates local and national newspapers, making the Peterson case a symbol of how social prominence can mask horrific criminal behavior. The Peterson family trial begins in February 1908 and quickly becomes one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in American history, attracting national media attention and setting important legal precedents for prosecution of organized trafficking networks. Federal prosecutors present overwhelming evidence of the family's criminal activities, while defense attorneys struggle to explain away documentation and testimony that clearly demonstrates their client's guilt. Prosecutor James Hartford presents victim testimony that provides heartbreaking details about the Peterson family's criminal operations and the devastating impact of their activities on hundreds of individuals and families. The courtroom is frequently moved to tears as survivors describe their experiences and the lasting trauma they suffered as a result of the family's exploitation and abuse. The trial reveals previously unknown details about the extent of the Peterson network's operations, including connections to criminal organizations in Europe that had been supplying victims and receiving payments for facilitating international trafficking activities. Evidence shows that the family had been planning to expand their operations to include West Coast cities and had been investing trafficking profits in establishing new criminal enterprises. Defense attorneys attempt to portray the Peterson family as victims of their own success, claiming that their legitimate business operations had been infiltrated by criminal elements without their knowledge or consent. However, the extensive documentation of family involvement in planning and coordinating trafficking activities makes such claims impossible to sustain against prosecutorial evidence. Henry Peterson's testimony in his own defense proves disastrous, as his attempts to minimize his role in the family's criminal activities directly contradict documented evidence and witness testimony. His arrogant demeanor and apparent lack of remorse for his victims create a negative impression that undermines any sympathy the jury might have felt for his family's situation. Eleanor Peterson's defense team attempts to portray her as a devoted wife who had been manipulated by a domineering husband, but evidence of her direct participation in identifying and targeting victims through her charitable work makes such arguments unconvincing. Her tearful testimony about wanting to help immigrants fails to explain why she continued activities that clearly resulted in harm to the people she claimed to assist. The trial also exposes the broader network of corruption and complicity that enabled the Peterson family's operations, with several Baltimore officials and business leaders being implicated in activities that facilitated trafficking or concealed evidence of criminal behavior. These revelations damaged the reputations of prominent citizens and institutions throughout the city. After 6 weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury finds all 4 Peterson family members guilty on multiple counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, and related charges. The verdicts represent a complete victory for federal prosecutors and establish important legal precedents for future trafficking cases. Judge William Harrison sentences the Peterson family members to unprecedented prison terms that reflect both the severity of their crimes and the court's determination to send a strong message about trafficking prosecution. Henry Peterson receives 25 years in federal prison, while Eleanor receives 20, and William and Margaret each receive 15 years, marking some of the longest sentences ever imposed for trafficking-related offenses. The Peterson family's vast criminal enterprise is dismantled systematically, with federal agents seizing assets worth over $2 million that will be used to compensate victims and fund anti-trafficking efforts. Their legitimate businesses are sold at auction, with proceeds going to organizations that provide services to trafficking survivors and work to prevent future exploitation of vulnerable populations. Baltimore society undergoes a period of intense self-examination following the Peterson revelations, with charitable organizations, religious institutions, and civic groups implementing new oversight procedures designed to prevent similar exploitation of their well-intentioned efforts to assist immigrants and other vulnerable populations. The scandal permanently changes how the city's elite approach charitable work and social responsibility. The Peterson case becomes a landmark in federal trafficking prosecutions, establishing legal precedents that enable more effective investigation and prosecution of similar criminal networks throughout the United States. McKenna's investigative techniques become standard practice for federal agents working trafficking cases, and his documentation methods are adopted by law enforcement agencies nationwide. Survivor advocacy organizations use the Peterson case to raise awareness about trafficking issues and secure increased federal funding for victim services and prevention programs. The high-profile nature of the case helps educate the public about the reality of trafficking in American communities and the importance of recognizing warning signs that might indicate criminal exploitation. Margaret Peterson dies in prison in 1915, reportedly never acknowledging her guilt or expressing remorse for her actions. Henry Peterson serves 18 years before dying of a heart attack in 1925, while Eleanor is released in 1925 after serving 17 years, but dies in poverty and obscurity 2 years later, rejected by the society that had once celebrated her charitable work. William Peterson, released in 1920 after serving 12 years, attempts to rebuild his life under an assumed name, but struggles with the lasting consequences of his criminal actions and family notoriety. He dies in 1945, having never successfully reestablished himself in legitimate business or social circles. The Peterson mansion is eventually demolished in 1920, with the site becoming a small park dedicated to trafficking victims and survivors. A memorial plaque reads, "In memory of those who suffered and in commitment to vigilance against exploitation of the vulnerable." The memorial serves as a permanent reminder that respectability and social prominence cannot excuse criminal behavior or protect those who prey upon society's most defenseless members. McKenna continues his career in federal law enforcement, becoming a national expert on trafficking investigations and helping to establish specialized units dedicated to combating human exploitation. His work on the Peterson case influences federal policy for decades and helps save countless lives through improved law enforcement techniques and victim protection programs.